Okay, today's guest is Hans Wilhelm, who's a mystic, author, and illustrator of over 200 books for all ages, including some together with Byron Katie. His books have sold over 40 million copies and are translated into 30 languages. Hans has recently created over 130 short YouTube videos in which he visually explains the spiritual laws of the universe. In these videos, you can watch him drawing the dynamics of these laws and see how all the dots connect. This absolutely is a unique visual presentation, which has made his videos so successful that they've been watched by over 17 million viewers. The videos are also available free on his website or his connection to his work with www.lifeexplained.com. Welcome, Hans.
Thank you. Thank you, madam. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, it's a very interesting time as many people are going through different changes in their spiritual growth, finding new ways and new paths to better understand life. And some of the work that you do has helped. In fact, I watched numerous videos of yours, and it gave me a clearer perspective through the illustrations and through the ability to visually see something and then also hear it in a short form, which in terms of attention span would probably be good for teenagers and maybe people whose attention span isn't that good. But for myself, it was also worthwhile. So maybe you could just give us a little bit of a background of how you got into this type of work.
Well, my occupation usually is to be a writer and illustrator, a lot for children, and I've been doing it for some 45 years now. And I never intended to really expose my spiritual path to the public, but it was the death of my father, who didn't believe in life after death. And so just before he died, I told him what he might expect in case he would what to expect after death. And he smiled and he said, okay, that's your belief. And so after a few days later, he died. And I totally forgot about it. But it was 5 years later when I ran into a psychic who came up to me right away, didn't know the person. He says, I just want to come to you. Your father is here and he just wanted to thank you because whatever you have said about life after death and what to expect was true. And he's deeply grateful for that. And he says he is working at the moment at the receiving station of souls who have passed from this world into the next. And he sees so much confusion there. So many souls have no idea that they're actually even dead. And so he says, would I not please write books about this and tell more people about what I had told him? And I didn't believe that much in writing more books, because books I just read only for a small minority. And so I decided that I would like to do something for young people, because I remember when I was a teenager, or even younger before, I wanted to know more about the spirituality of life, or why we are here, where we come from, and what to expect. And there was nothing. There was no internet, there was no Google, and so on. So I was really stuck. So I thought young people have these questions too. So I tried to do YouTube videos. This was before TikTok. Today I probably would have done TikTok, but so I started with my YouTube series, and what I do there, I just simply illustrate these things. For instance, anybody who is going to watch them will see that I basically, when you see how everything connects, how the karma is connected and how this person that does harm, and you store it in the planets and it comes back to you. When you see this all visually, as you said earlier, it becomes much clearer. All these abstract texts become clearer. And I do this mostly for myself. I do the video for two people, just for myself, so that I understand the spiritual truth myself, because once I see them myself visually, it becomes much more powerful in my memory bank, and I understand it better. And then also make it for one other person who may enjoy these videos somewhere in the internet, whom I will never meet. If the video is enjoyed by more people, great. But I only do it for one more person, because the moment I'm involved in numbers and says, oh, I want to reach 1 million people, then I'm right back in my ego, and that doesn't work. So I found out I just do it for the two of us, just for myself and this one person. And I do it sort of like Einstein. I think he said something, if you can't explain it to what you know, but to a 6-year-old, you probably haven't understood it yourself. So I make it very clear that I understand it. And that's why actually my videos are also shared with children or young people, very young people. It's easy to understand. They often still remember these truths. They are coming from the other spiritual world. if they haven't been indoctrinated too much by our worldly beliefs, they still remember it and they respond to it very clearly. Very often children also have a much healthier attitude towards death and so on than adults have, because they know this is not the only life, and they very often still even remember their past lives and past existence. So this is what I've been doing now for roughly a bit more than 10 years, and I do this as a hobby. These videos are totally free. I don't advertise on it. I don't use, they're not commercial in any way.
Right.
And if you like them, it's fine. If anybody doesn't like them, that's fine. I have zero interest to convert anybody, to convince anybody that this is the truth. I can only share my understanding of the spiritual path and what I have learned over the years and what has worked in my life. And if it works for others, that's great. If not, it's also great, because there are so many wonderful spiritual paths out there, and mine is not for everyone. So this is basically how I started off, and I share it, and I have great joy doing it, because today I'm communicating with people all over the world writing to me. So in all the years of COVID, where everybody else was rather isolated, I had this international outreach, which was rather fun.
Yeah. It's interesting, the process of using, let's say, religion, relating to your father in terms of going to the church, when most people go to church as doctrine or dogma, as opposed to actually opening up to the true sense of what spirituality may be, in terms of going on the path and learning the lessons of what life offers. I know, for example, myself, of trying to learn about going on a spiritual path through my own personal suffering. And rather than becoming the victim of circumstances, which many people do, I used it to turn the energy into some sort of wisdom and personal growth. Your work itself brings about that type of helpfulness, so to speak, because, for example, we come in here with the feeling of running away from disease, fearful of death, and not knowing what happens in the afterlife, or what happens if we do return. Do we believe in reincarnation? And many of your videos answer these questions in a very pertinent and easy way to understand. So maybe you can just give the audience a little bit of a background in terms of disease, in terms of some of the causes of them, not just being physical, but emotional, and where that leads to.
Well, disease. Yes, a disease is usually a sign that somewhere along the line we have acted against the law of love, or thought against the law of love. We have not been ourselves. We are creatures made out of love, and loving is our natural default setting. And whenever we do not do something, and when we do something for egoistic reason, for selfish reason, for power reason, or because we want to take energy from another person, then we are acting against our own true self. And that has consequences. And that consequence is what is generally called in the karma, which is basically cause and effect. What we are sowing, we are reaping. Christ spoke very clearly about this law. And it is in a law which is effective in the temporary reality. In the absolute reality, there is no such thing like karma, like time and space. But here, where we are right now, this is a tool for us to understand and to realize that somewhere along the line we have made a mistake. And we can, when we recognize what it is, also correct it through forgiveness, making amends, asking for forgiveness. And the same applies also anybody who has hurt us in any way, to give them forgiveness. So whenever we have a negative thought, something selfish thought, or something, it can be a depressing thought, or anything that is what we know is not loving, that soul firstly appears in our corona, in our aura, and then it goes, if it's not immediately sort of let go of, slowly goes into our soul, and in the soul it goes, the soul flow gives the energies to the various chakras or energy centers, and it can there block some of these chakras. And when it blocks one of these chakras, it means that certain organs in our body don't get the energy of life energy sufficiently, and that's how they sort of can become ill, because they don't have enough energy. So it's a very simple way how this works. It's just basically, we call it an overshadowing, a shadowing of our soul, and also shadowing of our body. So an illness is always some negativity that we have thought, acted, or felt in the past and not cleared up. But we must be very careful when we see an ill person. And this is something we must not assume that this person has done something wrong in this or a past lifetime. Because there are also a lot of people at this time who incarnate and take on the karma of other souls who have fallen so deep in the spiritual world that it will take them eons to clear their own karma. And out of love, some other souls are very close to the soul will take on that karma and incarnate on their behalf and carry their karma. So we must never assume that automatically the person who is sick has done also that for themselves. We are not here to judge. Whatever a person goes through is only between God and themselves and not us. We are here to help. If the person comes to us to want some help, like medical help, or you do some tree healing measurements, that's absolutely right, and that's perfect. We are here we can ask doctors, we can use the medical branch to help us in our illness, to help us to get our illness, or sort of to soothe our illness, or to heal us, basically. Helpful, of course, is also to recognize where we think this may have come from. How have we caused it, so that we go to the source of this ill thinking, doing, so that we can undo that and no longer do that and clear it up. Because otherwise the illness will only stay or will come back again until this karma has been cleared up. It's not only stored in our body, in our soul, it's also stored in the repository planets, where all our karma, whatever we do, think, say, and act, is stored. And eventually these planets move, come into a constellation, and unload the karma that we have given into the karma. And then it comes back as karma. This is usually in the same lifetime. Most of the karma that we experience is a result of things which we have done in this lifetime. But there's also a lot of stuff which we carry on from past lifetimes. So sometimes people get amazing illnesses and I cannot relate it to anything that happened in this lifetime. This can be very often be an illness that comes from a previous lifetime. And Edgar Cayce has done wonderful work on that one and explains that thing. In my video about illnesses and karma, I think I give several examples of how previous misdeeds present themselves as illnesses in this lifetime. And again, karma and illness and so on is not a punishment. It's a teaching tool to make us gently understand this wasn't a good idea. Let's clear it up. Let's move on positive, lovingly. That's how I see the illness. Now, you as a healer may see it slightly differently, and I'm interested to hear what you say to that.
Well, in terms of, I mean, I think they're remnants of past lives, the accumulation of energies that have not been dealt with or worked on on an emotional level. But I do think that they play a role in creating some type of event in the life where if we didn't resolve it, then we will have to experience some form of it. Maybe not having the exact memory of it, but having remnants of certain physical ailments or illnesses that mimic or are passed on. I mean, they say people who do have past lives have scars on different parts of their body from where they may have been shot or where they have been wounded.
Right. Yeah.
I know for myself, be it that we spoke a little bit before, I did have a recollection of a past life in terms of being a doctor in a concentration camp. And actually doing healing on patients. And afterwards, which was actually a couple of years ago, a woman got up and said, "I remember you." I said, "From where?"
Wow.
And she told me she remembered me from Auschwitz.
Wow. That's a heavy one.
It was a very heavy one because I walked around with the energy of feeling the sense of guilt, of not understanding it, but actually having a connection to it. As I spoke earlier, I learned German fluently within 5 months. I lived in Germany. I felt at home there. And then when I had asthma, when I looked up at a vent in my work building, I looked up at the vent and I was getting panic attacks from looking at that particular vent.
Wow. Yeah. Gosh,
So,
that's interesting.
so as you speak about past lives and reincarnation, many people don't believe in that. And I believe you mentioned in one of the videos about the church and the historical timeline. And that's a very interesting thing because reincarnation to me makes me feel that life goes on and not that I have to take the money and run and live an ego-based life in the present life that I'm in. So maybe you can speak about that because that's one of my interests of people I see buying the fancy cars, buying the fancy house, thinking that life ends after they have all their physical materialism.
Yeah, you can't blame them. I mean,
No,
it's
I
true.
understand. So then how do we balance that part of our lives with basically having that spiritual sense that life goes on?
See, it's difficult to convert anybody or convince anybody. Convert is a horrible, horrible word. To convince anybody that there is life before death and after death. This is something which you can't prove. Even with all the DNA experience, whatever it is, you can talk yourself silly. But a person who doesn't believe it, doesn't see it, will never understand it. Like there are people who do not believe that there is climate changes here in this world right now. There are people who just only stuck on their belief system, which is fine, and we have to respect that. I think life will teach them on their own eventually that there is more to life. And if they don't get it in this lifetime, they will definitely learn it afterwards or in this lifetime, or in the next lifetime. It's very difficult to make these things clear to somebody who is not open. So same with my father, who was not willing to understand it and learned it afterwards. And we all learn it in our time, and that is okay. I think the belief in reincarnation is also not necessary. If we believe in just the golden rule, that's all. You don't even have to be a Christian or Jew or whatever it is to have some deep spiritual or religious teachings. You just have the golden rule, which goes through all cultures. That to do unto others as you want them to do unto you, and vice versa, not to do unto others what you don't want them to do unto you. That covers everything. If we all would live by this one simple rule only, day to day, this world would be in total harmony. And that people can understand, I think, explaining that because they do understand that there is very often something like cause and effect in their own life, that if they're angry to somebody, anger comes back to that, and etc. Whatever they send out immediately often comes back to them. So the golden rule is something they make a grasp. And then otherwise, I send them our blessings. That's it. Everybody learns in their own time.
Yeah.
And for me, there is no question that there is a reincarnation. You yourself have had experiences or past life experiences or memories. But even if you don't have the memories, I mean, it makes total. The moment I understood reincarnation, everything to me made sense. Why people are rich, why they are poor, why some are sick, some are helpless, some are crazy. Or everything can suddenly be explained through the simple law of reincarnation. And you said earlier what to do if somebody is totally drawn into the worldly life. We all are to a degree, like our pleasures and like our comfort and like our guides, like their motor cars and all these kinds of things. Yes, these are all tools. And the key is, of course, not to be attached to it. It's like money. Don't be attached to it. You can enjoy these things. We don't have to live like monks or sort of like a hermit. We can enjoy these things. The key is just not to be attached to it. And that is something life will usually teach us over time. Whatever we are attached to, we will sooner or later lose. And when we look back on stuff which we were very dear to us and we have lost over time, that's sort of a lesson that don't be attached to anything. And we will learn that in our own time. But reincarnation definitely was always also teaching in the old Hebrew and the old Jewish history for thousands of years. I mean, there are still many like Shabbat and Hasidic and so on that believe strongly in reincarnation. And of course, Jesus also grew up at a time when there were a lot of different Jewish congregations. There were already split then in 1,000 congregations than there are now, and a belief in reincarnation. So this was not an abstract kind of concept. They understood it at the time. And of course, many, and the Bible says that people went up to him and asked him, who are you? And they said, you are Emmanuel, or lots of other answers we find there. So there are quotes in the Bible about this. And reincarnation is a concept which was taught by Christ very clearly, very clearly. This, of course, confused the churches. And of course, the church was not the one who really took it off, not the Pope. It was actually an emperor who insisted to take out the reincarnation teachings. And that really brought up a lot of problems in the church, because now suddenly they couldn't explain where we come from and what has happened after death. Because if you go to the Catholic priests and ask them about this question, where do I come from and where do I going, they have no real clear answer. They say, well, maybe in purgatory or all this kind of stuff, which was made up afterwards, because they no longer could explain life with the reincarnation, repeated lives. So they had a big problem there afterwards, and that's where we are. They unfortunately took the reincarnation idea out, and then millions and millions of people over the last few centuries, since the 6th century, when this change was made, grew up not even thinking of possibility of reincarnation. And yet the majority of people today in the world knows about reincarnation. And in the Eastern world, of course, it's very popular. And even here in America, a lot of people more and more believe in reincarnation. And that can be a very helpful tool to understand that. But as I said, it's not necessarily. Just live by the golden rule.
Yeah, I mean, I have many friends who I talk these subjects about. Many of them are closed off and don't have a concept. They look at religion as a foundation that is an indoctrination, as opposed to, just as I said earlier, from my own experience, and I know other people's experience, when people go down a certain rabbit hole and they experience trauma on their path, they fall in the lap of going down different roads and finding ways of comforting themselves or understanding the concepts of life. Um, as you speak of reincarnation, many people may understand why we reincarnate, and maybe you can explain a little bit deeper the reasoning of what the purpose of us here on this earth plane is to serve.
Well, I think it's a good question, yeah, because my new video, I'm just working on this one. Now, in the spiritual realm, just once there was a certain from the absolute reality, a certain group left this of spiritual, pure spiritual being left the absolute reality. We call it in the Bible the fall of angels. Certain group left the original absolute reality, where there is no time, there is no space, there's only the permanent now. Here we now suddenly they fell into the realm of time and space, of contrasts, and of sowing and reaping, the law of karma. And they fell deeper and deeper through selfishness. They were acting against the law of love. And there are 7 layers, and the lowest layer is the material universe. And here in the material universe, we have a planet Earth. And planet Earth was one way how a soul could, in a very short time, clear up their karma. Because here Earth was also unique. It attracted souls from all different levels of the spiritual realms. Everything else in the spiritual realm goes by the law of attraction. Like attracts like. So the souls were all surrounded by like-minded or like-vibrating other souls. Now here on Earth, you incarnate and suddenly you were surrounded by people who thought differently, different cultures, different colors, very different. We were exposed by a lot of different kind of vibration, ideas, concepts, cultures, and so on. So suddenly we are really can learn something here. And here on Earth, we also have a physical body. And our karma can express itself through the physical body as a form of an illness. And we do have healers like doctors, medicals who can heal us. So the body is a buffer of our karma. So in a very short time, through forgiveness, making amends, asking for forgiveness, we can clear up much of our karma. Some say we can clear up most of our karma, so that our soul becomes a higher vibration, which after death then would go onto a higher sphere of purification. Unfortunately, many of us have, whenever we incarnated, got more and more caught up in the worldly desires and pleasures. So we incarnated over and over and over again. We are speaking of souls who have incarnated 100 times, 1,000 times. That has never been the concept or the idea of divinity. This was only a short one-time, two-time visit, maybe. It's like repeating third graders over and over again. That would be foolish. So unfortunately, we are caught in an earthbound reincarnation cycle versus being heaven-bound and going to the higher spheres. So that's unfortunately the case, that many of us are here repeatedly, because the vibrations of this world or the lures of the words can really be very strong, very attractive. Like we can have our physicality, we can use all the pleasures we can think of, and we don't have these bodies, these physical bodies in the spiritual world. And a lot of souls rather like to come back here to continue their sensuality in many ways. That is unfortunately a great problem. And also the more karma we create here in each lifetime, the more pull again on the soul to clear up that karma as well, in addition to the one we we had before, in addition to the one we had before. So we are loading ourselves more and more karma. It's very interesting because a lot of people want to dream in immortality or live 150 years and so on. The fact that we do not live 150 years is a blessing. That we only live maybe 60, 70, 80 years or 90 years is a blessing, because we can't screw up more. We can't burden ourselves with more karma. So we have to look at life here, because life is very short. I've got this wonderful poem here, which I found once on a cup of a Starbucks. Life is a school for angels. Love is the teacher. So you do your homework without fear. Death is merely graduation. I think that was a wonderful point. It says it all. It's only a very short visit we have here. It only takes, what is it, 24,000 days or whatever. It's very, very short compared to eternity, and we are eternal beings.
Right.
So it's like going to the movies for an hour and two. You totally forget who you are. You get totally involved in that movie, and afterwards you come back and you're yourself again. This is how short our earthly lives are. And when you get older, like myself, you realize how very, 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 very short this life is. And so then you go back and return, and hopefully into a higher vibration, into a higher kind of a sphere of purification. That is actually the idea why we have this planet Earth. It's a gift. It's a beautiful planet. And it's an enormous, wonderful an opportunity for us to grow.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That the poem is wonderful and the words are wonderful.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, as you say this, so many people, as again, as the general population, as I see it, doesn't have the concept of understanding that we do reincarnate. Maybe half the population. So on that end of it, the ability for a person to generate self-love and compassion for another human being may be dampened by the fact that they don't believe, or a person may not believe, that we are a soul in a body that is never ending and is on a continuum. So in other words, we're around the merry-go-round, spinning around in circles each time, and we have different experiences. Some people may just say it's one time around and you got to jump off and the ride is over. So how do you explain the concept without using the ideology of reincarnation, how a person can generate love and compassion? In other words, go from the brain to the heart, when most people...
What comes to my mind is the law of projection, that whatever I see outside of myself is nothing but a reflection of myself, which includes everybody I meet, who is basically none other than a teacher of mine. Everybody I meet is my teacher. When I see the world differently from this perspective, that everything outside there is just a mirror image of myself, then I feel very different already to everything and everyone I interact with and everybody I see. Because the moment I have an emotional charge towards a person, may it be positive or negative, that emotional charge tells me that something in me that needs to be cleared up. So that problem is not out there with that person. It's always in me. And it's not only a person, it's also a situation. When I see something on television which tremendously upsets me, that is something. There is a mirror in me. If I see war on television and I get very upset, I have to ask myself, where is the war within myself? What is in me going on? Because the outside world is a mirror. Now, this concept may be a little bit unusual for people who have never heard that, but I think it's worthwhile to mention the possibility that maybe everything out there is a mirror. I have a beautiful little toy here, which explains it. It's a little guy in there. And there's all these mirrors out around there. Oops. And so he only sees himself. Wherever he looks, this guy sees himself. That's you and I in our life here on Earth. We are only seeing ourselves. And if somebody sees a horrible world out there, then he or she thinks he or she is horrible. If the people who see a wonderful world see also themselves as more positive. So whatever we see, of however we perceive or understand the outside world, is a reflection of ourselves. So there may be a starting point to look at ourselves. What is it in me? What is bothering me in the outside world? And clear that up in one way or the other. And love is always the answer. Whatever emotion, in a negative emotion, is always lack of love. You can soothe every negative emotion through love by showering with love. Fear is particularly now a very popular, not a popular, is the wrong word, a very prominent kind of emotion, which a lot of people have now. Even going to the next year, I think even I myself a bit questioning about the new year coming, what's going up there and what's
Yeah.
going to happen. Um, so the fear itself, if we really not suppress it, but feel it in our end and really accept it in our and shower it with love, can really be reduced just by the visualizing of love energy onto our body, which feels fearful at the moment. So a lot can be done by just showering whatever is love. And this also includes the relationships and everything else. Naturally, it also must be found out, why am I fearful? What am I afraid of? And in all cases, it's always a loss of comfort or what we are used to. Sort of that is basically the main reason why we fear comfort of our body even, and etc., etc. So, and then comfort comes always from our ego. And only our ego can be fearful. Our higher self could never be fearful. It's laughing at it, but it hasn't. So that's in a nutshell. Did I answer your question in a way?
Yeah, you did. Well, I can speak from my perspective in
Mm-hmm.
terms of looking at myself inside of those mirrors. I know that if I'm in the company of other people, it's easy, obviously, for me to project my feelings onto someone else. So I find that if I do take the time to spend time alone, then I lose that ability to then reflect it off someone other than the walls, and then I feel it myself.
Yeah.
So I think the ice, not the, I wouldn't say I would say loneliness, the sitting with oneself is an important aspect of then feeling what you displace and what you don't displace. I guess to
Mm-hmm.
take the time to actually sit with yourself. And I think these particular times over the last couple of years have created that discomfort for many people of,
Mm-hmm.
looking for distractions at a greater extent in order to lose themselves, but then again displace what's fearful within themselves. I've been experiencing a lot of fear myself because I finished working as a teacher for 30 years, and
Mm-hmm.
as I sit in my own little world, I feel the reflections of my emotions from all the aspects of my childhood, of the things that I was occupied at my job, or distracted, so to speak. um,
Mm-hmm.
so how do we balance the distractions from the sense of working on our own self? Uh, is it possible? I mean, do we have to go up the path of spirituality? Do we have to go down and uncover who we really are to find that love for other people? Do we have to have self-love for ourselves?
I think without a healthy self-love, not a self-adoration, but self-love,
Yeah,
we can't really love anybody else, because then, as long as we don't love ourselves, we are trying to go get energy from other people. We want the approval, the acceptance, and their appreciation. And that's a big problem. And for that, we whore ourselves. We do the most craziest thing just to be loved by other people. So we really must understand who we are.
yes,
For myself, I can only speak. I have got over the years, developed what I feel a relatively strong relationship to divinity, to God, to Christ. And having these energies feeling in me and having this connection with me, my need for outside approval and love and energy has really diminished, because I just feel loved. And that helps me to look at the world a little bit differently than I used to be in the past, when I was really hunting for appreciation, love, and approval of other people.
right,
And that, I think, is an important point, to find an inner grounding. And an inner grounding, it's a belief system. But a belief system becomes a knowing system when we apply it, when we try it out. And in my life, I have had a few instances where I needed that inner support and help, and I got it instantly when I asked for it. Having had this experience that I was actually supported inwardly, by a higher force than myself, leaves no question or doubt in my mind. And that is something which I can always fall back onto whenever I am out of my inner balance. So to create an inner connection to something higher than oneself, I think, is very, very important. Maybe even more important than the self-love, because when you feel you are loved by that entity, that is actually so strong and so powerful that the self-love idea can be very easily misused by our egos. So I'm a bit careful on that one. But the key is to feel secure and grounded in oneself, and then loving others, accepting others is much, much easier, and having no need to change them. I think that's the main key. As long as I want to change another person, I basically telling myself, I want to change on this. I want to believe whatever I want to convince anybody else is something I have not believed myself. And that's what, whenever we speak, we basically try to convince ourselves. When whatever we know, we do not talk about. Anything we are not sure about, we speak about. Not, we think we want the other person to convert the other person, but in truth, we want to trying to convert ourselves. Anything what we speak about is something we are not sure about
Yeah,
ourselves.
convincing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fact of codependency is becomes stronger when we're in that mindset of not working on the self-love or going through the paths that lead to that. You have a very interesting video which I watched, was the generating love and sending it out to the universe. And that was a very powerful tool for me. There's times I would say on my own path that my heart closes for my own personal conflicts with my children and other things that go on. And I try to balance that opening and closing act by finding work that that keeps me open. And that video that you had was one of them, that downloading the energy through the crown chakra into the body and giving out love just to the universe, rather than a specific individual, and closing yourself off to an individual and then it returning back, rather than it being ego-based, more of a universal spiritual energy that people feel. We spoke about karma before. People usually look at the word karma and they say, well, they use the statement, you'll get your share. They use it in a negative way. They use it as a punishment. They hope a person gets their share if something was done wrong to them. And then again, you're creating karma again for yourself, wishing negativity on someone else and then reaping that as what you sow. So how do we, you said you can change karma. And you said the fastest way of dealing with karma is through love and through opening up the heart, and not continuing new karmic cycles. It's interesting. I had watched and I forgot Ishra, talking about the Akashic records and how people were their karmic cycle was completely dropped once they meditated and they had a connection to their guru, who cleared away their karmic path through all their life. I don't, if it's possible.
Good for them. Good for them. that sounds a bit strange.
Yes, but yeah, I was just interested in that concept. I also have a friend whose son was paralyzed, and as I speak to him in a short term, as almost in an animated way, because you don't have too much time to tell somebody who's new to that type of information that we reincarnate. We're a soul that chose the body that we live in, and we chose the lessons we're going to learn. And he said, yeah, maybe that makes sense. Maybe that makes sense. And it's interesting that we do have a memory in our higher self, on our soul level, of that information. And it's as almost we have to downgrade in order, on an ego sense, to survive on this plane, to dumb ourselves down, or to have insomnia or amnesia, so to speak, from the reincarnations that take place. Yeah. So let's move on a little bit to the next subject, if we could, which is your illustrating and your book writing, which is very fascinating. My girlfriend is a teacher and knows of your work, and I was fascinated. I told her I was interviewing you, and she said, oh, wow, that's so interesting. I said, yes, especially for a school teacher. Maybe you could just share a little bit of how you became an illustrator, an author, when it started.
I always wanted to make stories, and I loved stories because they gave me the feeling like being God. You are creating a whole world and create creatures. And I did not start off that career, but initially I was in business, and then I had a business college and degrees. But later on, when I lived in Africa, I suddenly slowly started to make my changes. Came to America, and here I started my career constructively and started with little stories, which I was very successful to sell. I write and illustrate them, and they have been selling now for many, many years, and I'm very happy. I do less and less these days because after over 200 books, there comes a point when you start repeating yourself. It's just not normally, there's only so many stories you can tell. So, and I enjoy doing my videos now. So I had a wonderful time as an author and illustrator, and saw a lot of children all over the country, around the world, when I visited schools. So it was a very exciting life I had. Today I live more secluded, and do my work now as with my videos, which is with great fun. Basically, that's in a nutshell. But it was a wonderful life and a wonderful career I had, and I came into contact with a lot of people, wonderful people, met a lot of wonderful teachers everywhere, such dedicated people, and working under such difficult situations, particularly here in America, where teachers are not sufficiently paid and honored and supported. So yeah, that's in a nutshell, basically. But that's what I used to do.
Yeah, and what are your future plans? Do you have any other paths that you choose to go up to fulfill your soul's path, soul's journey, other than writing and mystic work? And
I do this, what I'm doing at the moment with my video, which gives me a lot of fun. I mean, you have done videos yourself. You're doing videos yourself. It's a very creative process. I have many of my books have turned made into animation movies for television in different countries, but I'm not really involved in that. I just sort of say okay to various drawing or whatever. But here in these videos, I do from the beginning to the end. I'm writing and go to the final thing, and it's a very fulfilling process to bring something out which from the beginning to the end, and where I am in total control on that one. And that's what I enjoy at the moment. What I will enjoy next year or if after that, we'll see.
yeah,
We will leave that open. So far, I'm blessed to have this, and a lot of wonderful videos still to make. And the more I learn, the more I can do that. That's really the fun thing at the moment.
yeah. So if anybody was interested in in viewing your work, where could they go to see that?
Well, it's under hanswilhelm.com. This is my website as an author. And then, of course, my videos are on lifeexplained.com. But if you just go to YouTube and punch in my name, Hans Wilhelm, you will immediately be led to the website, to the videos. So that's basically where I
Yeah.
can be found, or my work can be found.
If you can leave the audience and myself with the final message on any type of subject you'd like, what would you say?
Well, I would say just two things I think it's very important. First of all, you are never alone. Loneliness, as we haven't discussed yet, there is probably one of the biggest, maybe the major problem here at the moment in the world. But we never are alone. We are continuously surrounded by divinity, by our guardian spirit, by Christ, God, whoever you believe in. But we are never, ever alone. This is, of course, this is a mystery about being here in the spiritual, in the physical world, where we don't see the spiritual sides. But we are never, ever alone. So we can always turn to some power higher than ourselves for help and guidance. And the other thing to really get out of any negative feeling is always to use gratefulness. To be grateful for whatever comes to mind, what right in front of us, grateful for this computer, grateful for our conversation, grateful for the paper here, for the microphone, whatever I have. It is a gift which I need at the moment to go through this day, and that helps the body. Be grateful to every cell in our body. Shower our body with gratefulness. Thank you. Thank ourselves, our organs. And the moment we get into the grateful mood and vibration, all the negative falls away. You can't be worried and be grateful at the same time. So the gratefulness is something I think I would like to leave your listeners or viewers with. Try the grateful house right now before, when you switch off the next video. Just find 10 reasons why you are grateful for whatever is around you, and you will feel better.
That's excellent words, and I could use that myself personally. And I want to thank you for sharing your inspirational insight, your longevity in passing on wisdom, and the ability for you to create illustrations which make it very easy for a person to draw concepts and understandings from the drawings themselves, and also the illustration and author work you do for children. So I want to thank you for joining me and giving me the opportunity to share this time with you.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. It was a pleasure to meet you, and also to meet your audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Hans.